Shana Tova. My friends, as we gather here this morning to welcome 5785, our Jewish community is navigating profound grief and uncertainty. The tragic events since October 7th confront us with life's fragility, the pain of loss, and the resilience that is most needed to endure. On that day, Israel and much of the Jewish world was shaken by an unprecedented and brutal attack launched by Hamas, leaving a deep wound in the heart of the Jewish people. Thousands of rockets were fired, and militants infiltrated Israeli towns, resulting in devastating loss of life, kidnappings, and widespread terror. The aftermath saw Israel declare war on Hamas, leading to a fierce and ongoing military conflict in Gaza, subsequent loss of life, and now war in the north with Hezbollah and with Iran. As we approach almost 1 year since that time, the war has continued, having a profound impact on Israeli society and the global Jewish community. The pain of that day and its consequences continue to reverberate each and every day around the world. The heaviness and the psychological and emotional burdens of this rupture, significant. This morning, while holding all of these truths, we celebrate still the potential joy and the light that a new year brings. While many of us feel the weight of the narrowness, and tsar, we call that in Hebrew, from Mitzrayim, the same word that refers to Egypt, the tight space of grief and ambiguity. Like our ancestors enslaved in Egypt, so many have shared with me, and I see that so many experience the feeling of limitation. And as I reflect on it all, there's one word that powerfully encapsulates the countless conversations, articles, podcasts, and news feeds regarding our current lived Jewish experience. And that word is constriction. Constriction, according to Rabbi Google, is defined, well, that's where I get my source. Rabbi Google defines constriction as the act of making something narrower by pressure, a tightening. It can be applied to physical objects, societal or political contexts, creative or intellectual fields, emotional or mental states. It is a place of contraction. It is held breath. It's an inability to see the other and grow ourselves. Allow me to share two personal experiences which I believe exhibit the weight of constriction's presence in real time. Since October 7th, I have had the privilege to travel to Israel with San Diego Jewish leaders and with some of you, to bear witness, to lend support, to serve as a messenger of stories, to bring back to our community the humanity of this moment in time. A moment seemingly unconceivable just 1 year ago. During one of my trips, I encountered a young man, no older than 30, a resident of Kibbutz Nachal Oz in Shahar Negev in the Gaza envelope, who now found himself in Mishmar HaEmek, a temporary dwelling place for many displaced from his kibbutz. I first encountered him pushing a beautiful, beautiful little boy in a stroller. I soon came to learn that Yuri, the young man's name, is actually the boy's uncle, and the boy's parents had been murdered on October 7th. Yuri spoke of the unbearable loss of his brother and sister-in-law, and the uncertainty of what lie ahead for him and his nephew, for whom he has now assumed full responsibility. Yuri's words to me were robotic, as if the weight of his grief had numbed him. As he shared, tears streamed down my face as I bore witness to his unimaginable burden. After our farewell embrace, I felt a tightening around my own chest, experiencing the young man's grief paralyzing his inability to express the full depths of his own pain, a near narrowness of uncertainty about his own future. Suddenly, he is now a parent, both his and his new child's life fundamentally altered. and for the others I encountered along the way. Their once peaceful and vibrant communities, tragically constricted by fear and loss and the consequences of sinat chinam, the purest of evil, with lives disrupted and horizons narrowed by grief and by trauma. Fast forward to this past summer. My family and I were enjoying one of our annual getaways to our home away from home on Martha's Vineyard. For over 20 years, this has been a place where we come together and we recharge as a family. And boy, did we need a recharge this summer. One day, as we turned a corner onto the main thoroughfare of one of the island's quieter towns, I was genuinely surprised to come across what appeared to be an anti-Israel rally. Curious, I told my family that I wanted to pay a visit to the gathering. Nicole, ever cautious and knowing me all too well, warned me, be careful and listen. As I approached and I spoke with a few of the peaceful protesters, we identified some shared realities and hopes around the pain of October 7th and the desire for calm, along with the return of hostages. We respectfully exchanged differences of opinion. However, after a few minutes, the discussion took a turn as one protester began to share her perspective that the events of October 7th were fabricated and the narrative fake. In that moment, I again felt a tightening, a constriction around my heart, an echo of the moments with Yuri in Israel. Still, I pressed on, engaging respectfully. I offered photos of the destruction I had personally witnessed, of families who had shared their harrowing accounts on that day, of the heroes who had saved lives on their kibbutzim. I believe that these images, these undeniable truths, would surely move anyone. But her response shook me. She said, "These are lies. This is propaganda. The IDF destroyed those homes and killed those people. Nothing you will show me will convince me otherwise." Last year, I had the opportunity to hear my colleague, Rabbi Sharon Brous, president of the JFS Annual Luncheon on Mental Health. She referenced a section in her book coming out at the time called The Amen Effect, which I highly suggest. She shared an ancient practice that's buried deep within the Mishnah, a Jewish legal compendium from around the 3rd century. And the text describes a pilgrimage ritual from the time of the Second Temple nearly 2,500 years ago. And it notes several times each year, hundreds of thousands of Jews would ascend to Jerusalem. There they would climb the steps of the Temple Mount and enter its enormous plaza, turning to the right in mass and circling counterclockwise. Concurrently, the brokenhearted, the mourners, those lonely and those sick would make the same ritual walk. However, they would turn to the left and circle in the opposite direction. Each person who encountered someone in pain would look into that person's eyes as they would cross with them. And they would say and inquire, "What happened to you? Why does your heart ache?" "My father died," a person might say. "There are so many things I never got to say to him." Or perhaps my partner left and I was completely blindsided. Or translated in our modern times, "My mother is sick and we're waiting for the test results." Or "My Saba, my child, is still being held in Gaza." Those who walk from the right would offer a blessing. "May the Holy One comfort you," they would say. "You are not alone." And then they would continue to walk until the person approached. This ancient practice reflects a deep understanding of the human psyche and spirit. When your heart is broken, when the specter of death visits your family, when you feel lost and alone and you are inclined to retreat, you show up. You entrust your pain to the greater community. The timeless wisdom of this ancient ritual speaks to what it means to be a human in a world of pain. This year you walk the path of the suffering. Perhaps next year it will be me. I hold your broken heart, knowing one day that you will hold mine. What a profoundly beautiful way for community to enforce its care and concern for the other, to share in the ebb and flow of human suffering, which comes and goes for each in their time. As I reflect on the wisdom our tradition offers with this teaching, I am also immediately pulled to awareness of the circle that has not been present in this past year's heartache and tragedy. As a community, we have been collectively waiting to hear from those people circling to the right on approach, to offer their blessing to us, to acknowledge our individual and our collective pain, to share the words, "You are not alone." Yet often, that person approaching on the right has looked down or away. As Jews, in our pain, many of us have felt unseen. The woman I encountered at the protest, her narrowness, her intense anger and fury, was a constriction so tight that it rendered her incapable of even acknowledging my personal pain and loss in that moment, or even simply holding space for words of comfort. This adds further constriction for so many of us here and so many out there, layering pain upon pain. How remarkable to know that our ancient ancestors knew how to take constriction and alchemize it into the expansive energy of connection and communal care. My friends, the malady of spiritual constriction manifests when people turn away from the suffering of others, particularly in moments of deep collective pain. In the wake of October 7th, we in the Jewish community have faced not only physical harassment and violence, but also the silent wound of being ignored or misunderstood. The constriction of spirit is not just the refusal to empathize, but the inability to hold space for the grief and the trauma of others. It reflects a narrowing of the soul, where fear and indifference or discomfort choke off the flow of compassion. I want to be clear this morning that my intentional focus on us as a Jewish community in no way dilutes the suffering of Palestinians or the many others around our globe who continue to grieve and have painful circumstances of their own. On the contrary, our tradition compels us to move beyond the identity of the persecuted and sufferer and offer the exact opposite, to open our hearts, to bear witness to and acknowledge the suffering of others, Jew and non-Jew alike. Yehuda Areleb, Alter of Ger, known as the Sfat Emet, taught that each of us carries a nekudat elochut, which means a divine spark. This eternal spark can feel constricted, especially in moments of tightness or struggle, evoking the linguistic or symbolic connection between the word I just taught you earlier, Mameitzar, or narrow spaces, a Mitzrayim, a place we know in our ancestry of constriction and slavery. Our task, we are mandated, the Sfat Emet teaches, is to expand and nurture the spark even when we feel victim. Expanding the spark is the work that we are called to do throughout these high holy days, and it requires work, and work I mean. And the work I'm talking about this morning is one that demands this word, tikva, hope. Tikva. Can you say it with me, tikva? Tikva. Tikva, hope, is not naive optimism. Tikva, hope, as I understand it, in its deepest wanting, is active creation. It is deliberate, a defiant act of crafting meaning and connection in dire circumstances. It involves rebuilding communities, relationships, and identities post-crisis. Tikva is witnessed throughout our Jewish civilization, from the exodus from Egypt to expulsion after expulsion from various homelands, to the Holocaust, and to October 7th. Throughout the entirety of our history, the Jewish people have brought faith to an uncertain future, rooted in a covenant and drive to create a more just and whole world and society. Tikva, hope, is the ability to flex our resilience muscles through meaning. Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, teaches that in the face of suffering, even the most painful circumstances contain the potential for purpose. We don't deny pain nor lean into the cliched energy of everything happens for a reason, which I tell you now I do not ascribe to. Rather, we insist on cultivating growth and identity and connection and empathy in the aftermath of our distress. Rabbi Brause's unearthing of this ancient pilgrimage ritual has deepened my own belief in the strength of community. It has reminded me of the power, the intense power of showing up when we want to withdraw, even when we fear we may be speechless or incapable of connection or action. In chaos, of which many of us have experienced this year, Tikva, hope, emerges not only from coming together, but from actively seeking the light in dark moments, as Rabbi Ackerman Hirsch taught us so beautifully last night. Communities in Israel have found meaning and healing through solidarity and shared rituals and collective memory. Grassroots organizations and volunteers embodying hope and resilience quickly stepped in to support those affected by the violence, providing food and shelter and emotional support for displaced families. Communities have opened their homes to host survivors, while countless others contribute to relief efforts through crowdfunding and donation drives and organizational supporting networks. This outpouring of Israeli society, of solidarity, has helped heal countless wounds and reminded that the strength of a united community can actually spark hope. Throughout my own time in Israel, I bore witness to incredible acts of moral beauty that sprang forth with urgency from every single person we met. Acts of selflessness and kindness and generosity. Social workers and trauma specialists, yoga teachers, massage therapists, all volunteering, leaving their own families to support those who were suffering more acutely. Tikva, hope, is defiance against chaos. It pushes us to ask ourselves, and in this moment, it really does, to say, what can we actually build? How can we make meaning of all of this? Hope becomes that sacred rebellion against the forces of chaos, akin to us lighting Shabbat candles or a Hanukkah menorah in the darkest of times in our year. Israeli artists and poets and musicians have been producing works that grapple with the pain of the tragedy while offering messages of healing and unity. New prayers and songs have become sources of individual and communal solace. Educational initiatives have been reimagined, focusing on fostering dialogue and building trust across divides. These actions reflect the deep-rooted belief in the possibility of healing, showing that, even in the face of great suffering, hope is sustained through collective action and creativity. And here, listen to this. In one of the most powerful acts of defiance against chaos since October 7th, many newborns in Israel have been given the name Beri, a name now associated with the site of the most profound devastation. And the name Beri in Hebrew means my wellspring. Could there be a more powerful symbol of the spiritual resilience of our people? By choosing the name, the place, Kibbutz Beri, marked by immense devastation for their children, they are reclaiming the life-giving essence of Beri, themselves, my wellspring, which has nourished our people throughout generations. On this Rosh Hashanah, I invite you, our beloved Beth Israel family, to know that whether it's the prayers we share with one another, the beauty and the power of the music that fills our sanctuary and our interwebs, the joy of being with loved ones in community, our blessings are not merely for good fortune to happen. Rather, they are our mandate, our task, and our call to be partners in creating that future that we want to make in this world. In the wake of October 7th, moving forward is going to require a conscious commitment to what I deem as soulful expansion. That means, and listen, if you don't walk away from anything with this sermon, walk away with this. Soulful expansion means keeping our hearts open even when the world feels heavy with loss. It means allowing ourselves to feel deeply so that we don't become numb to the suffering that's around us. It means living in the present and finding gratitude in the small moments, making meaningful contributions rather than waiting for the perfect future. Soulful expansion means living out loud, expressing our love for life, and amplifying, and I mean amplifying, Jewish joy, openly, unapologetically, and with the deepest of pride. It means practicing kindness and empathy in our daily interactions, because when we model the best of the Jewish people, we show the world a community rooted in love and justice and the relentless pursuit of Tikva, of hope. And yes, there are the concrete, tangible ways to support as well. Supporting Israel and global Jewish communities, seeking opportunities to engage in interfaith and cross-cultural solidarity building, continuing to advocate for justice and for human rights, truly investing in the next generation by supporting programs for youth and young adults that foster strong Jewish identity, resilience, and leadership. During Passover, when we read the Magid, the storytelling section of the Seder of which many are familiar, we lift the matzah and we declare halachma anya. This is the bread of affliction our ancestors ate in Egypt. But isn't the matzah also the bread of freedom, made in the haste as they fled to the promised land? So which is it? Is it the bread of affliction or liberation? It's actually both. We learn that the bread symbolizes both material poverty and redemption. What changes is not the matzah, but our orientation to its source. And in the words of the Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, alav shalom, what transforms the bread of affliction into the bread of freedom is our willingness to share it. On this Rosh Hashanah, as the sound of the shofar awakens us from the depths that take on new levels of meaning for so many of us this year, we are called to respond to the world around us. Each blast is a sacred reminder that our hope is our moral and our spiritual imperative. It's the sound of awakening to the brokenness of the world, followed almost immediately by the charge to repair it. We are committing to hearing that call with our ears and responding with our hearts and our deeds. We acknowledge the suffering and challenges in the world while affirming, and I mean affirming, that despair is not an option. The constriction we feel, the weight of grief and uncertainty and profound loss is not where our story ends. Our tradition teaches us that it is in the narrowest of spaces that the potential for liberation and expansion actually begins to form. Just as the Israelites found their way out of Mitzrayim, we can transform our affliction into freedom, our grief into meaning, and our loss into renewed purpose. As we dwell amongst one another this morning, I invite each of you to be the one who turns not to the right, but to the left, to face those in pain, to hold another in their struggle, and to offer them blessing. We are not alone. May this be the year to elevate the call of the shofar, and may our hope and resolve transform our constrictions into boundless, expansive possibility. Amen.